Okay, hi guys, it's me again, your boy, Samuel from Deity Stories. Originally, this channel was created for us to drop listening Bible stories and all those things. Although that was not just the intent, it was the startup of it. So, well, I stopped for a while. Then I got interested in this because of the philosophy I was doing. But this time around, I'm not necessarily talking about the philosophy and philosophical thoughts and all those things. But it was a statement that I made last time. What was that statement? The statement that I was trying to like talk about how will I say it? How that God boasted himself in Isaiah about about the children of Israel being his witness to his to his to the fact that he exists. You understand? You understand? Like what I mean is in this our faith, it is historical. And God was priding himself in Israel about what he did in bringing them out of Egypt. You understand? And then I talked about how prophecy too, understand, is one of the things God spoke something in the past and it came to pass in the future. So it's one of the things that I was talking about and saying, this is where I put my faith in. It is historical. There's track record. God has track records. So I had to say that it was not found dead. My meanings. I'm not talking about the one that he spoke and did not come to pass, because once when he was judged, it came to pass. Those ones are real. They are based on historical facts. God prophesied about what's his name. Prophesied that Babylon will destroy Israel. Yeah, and they went into slavery. You understand? There was even a prophecy about the Medians destroying Babylon. You know, all those things. So the records are true. The records are there. I think even the patient listener, I think that one too was there. So this time around, outside of that one, I want to talk about the ones that God was boasting himself about in Israel being his witness of the nation of Israel coming out from the land of Egypt. So what I'm saying is the Exodus story. The Exodus story, is it real or is it not? How can I say that it is based on history? I had to check it because my heart began to tremble, like it's true. So instead of me just saying it happened, when it's like, is it based on knowledge? So I assumed that it was like, how would I say it now? It was, let me just say it was not based on knowledge. I assumed. The reason was I already checked this ones I just talked about, this Isaiah ones I talked about then, and this one I just said now. I've already checked it before, and I knew that it is historical. But I did not check the Exodus one, so I just assumed that because this is real, understand, but that's not how things are done. So I was disturbed, and I said, let me go and check it out myself, and that I want to share, so that it's not be that I'm deceiving people. Understand? I don't want to deceive, and since it's my like I'm trying to show how much I'm proceeding and progressing. Or when I say that, just a follow up on these things. You're heading somewhere. So this is it here. So is the things happening in Exodus true, or is it a lie? An argument, according to Aristotle, let me not say an argument, a statement, according to Aristotle, or rather, a declarative statement is, how will I say it? Can a declarative statement, that once you say something, you have to check whether once it has been claimed, that's like a truth claim, it has been said, we have to now verify whether it is true or false. You can think about something. An idea is neither true nor false. You understand? It is neither true nor false. It's an idea. When it is true is when it aligns within yourself. You know that it is true. That's first one. And then when you check from reality whether it is true. So reality is one of the things that tell you that okay, this thing is true. You have to verify. Yeah. So I know whether it's false or not. So from history, is it true? Is it the crazy statement that the book of the Bible is making? The book of the Bible is claiming that this is true. So if it is wrong, then then it means that God is a liar, or rather we are basing our faith on a lie. It's a truth. In my study for this thing, I was questioned. Well, let's go. So, is it true? They said there is no direct evidence for it being true or false. It is rather that the answer is nuanced, and so there's no direct. So, it is nuanced. So there are many debates. It's from debates that you can be able to know that okay, this thing is true. Now, what is the Exodus story impact? What is the thing that we are supposed to know whether it's true or not? This is the declarative statement there. So the Exodus claims that Israelites lived in Egypt. So is that true? They were enslaved. Moses confronted Pharaoh the 10 plagues, the Red Sea crossing, 40 years in the wilderness, the arrival towards Canaan. So if history is true, or historically it is true, archaeologists will expect this. The evidence of large Israeli slave population in Egypt, records of plagues or disaster, evidence of a massive migration through Sinai, and sudden Israelite appearance in Canaan. So that's what to expect for them. Now, are they true? These are the evidence from scholars. The scholars is that the first one is, since we said there is an indirect evidence, because there's no direct evidence. In fact, let's stop there. This was the first thing that came to my mind in the search for this, is that for God to boast that Israel is his witness, because of the took them from Egypt to the promised land. God supposed protecting record though. Like the record supposed true. That was the reason why I presumed that that's the case, or presuppose that was the case. But as I said that, a thought came to me that even if God has a responsibility to preserve his word or his proofs of whatever he has done, God has his own human beings to have their own share of responsibility. It is not just solely God's responsibility. Humans have their responsibility. So now we'll not just put pin in there. If the book of Genesis is lost, even though the power of God can be there to keep it and preserve it in just one copy, the fact that human beings can be reckless to destroy it is there. It's possible. If humans are careless, it's possible that it's gone. So we cannot just put our reliance on the fact that God has to be protected by itself. You see, his heritage by itself also to protect it. Yeah, God has, but there's also a responsibility. So you can see that even when, in fact, let's look at this. God punished Israel because he preserved them who glorious Israel. When they sinned, God dealt with them. The destruction that God brought left only remnants, and these remnants were battered men. The people that you spit on. It's these the people that they call themselves the God, the jewel of the world. You see it? So if we do not keep our responsibility in likewise manner, even if God was supposed to preserve his heritage, it can be destroyed. And the only thing that God will preserve are remnants, bits and pieces. You understand? It may not be logical, but this is my own reasoning, my own logical reasoning. You understand? I mean, what I mean is what it may not be logical. I mean, it may seem illogical, yeah, but to me, it's logical. So, evidence or indirect proofs is the Semitic people that they really lived in Egypt. They lived in Egypt. And who are the Semitic people? The Semitic people are they are non-ethnic Egyptian. Like they are not from Egypt. They are mostly from they speak the Semitic languages such as Hebrews, Aramaic, all those things, and they came from the Levant and Mesopotamia. So those were the major distance. So when we are so Israel is among them, you understand? So the fact that they lived in Egypt is proof that okay, probably Israelites were there. But there's no record I mean there was no saying that okay, the Semitic people are Israelites. So you get I'm just saying that. So there's another thing again. It is the the Hyksos expulsion. The Hyksos expulsion is that the Egyptians chased away some sects called the Hyksos from their land, and it was similar to the way Egyptians and the Israelites were chased out. So the similarities made scholars to think that okay, probably this is the case. But the only issue here is that the Hyksos were rulers. They formerly ruled in Egypt. You understand? They formerly ruled Egypt. So the Israelites were not originally rulers. Rather, they were slaves according to the biblical team. So they did not fit that record. And also, chronologically, they do not fit as well as the timeline. It does not fit with biblical chronology. With biblical chronology. Anyway, so the scholars do not equate them at all. So we also have Egyptian records. You see, Egyptian records mention slaves and forced labor. So this matches okay. So the Egyptian record mentions slavery. So we know that since the biblical thing by the background story of Exodus is that Egypt brought about there was slavery there. It aligns. So okay. So we have talked about the Semitic people, even though the Hyksos, there's another one looks like trash. Understand? So the Hyksos, I mean I say the Semitic people probably Israelites probably. Then the fact that there was slavery. Okay. Fits the biblical thing. So then there's then another evidence is the the Mineta state. So it was this state was recorded. It's dated around 1208 BC, and it's the earliest. It has the earliest record of Israelites that's mentioned. That's Israel mentioned. Understand? There is no other Israelite record from outside biblical source or Israel sources that predates it. So it is there that is mentioned Israel. And this is what it says. It says Israel is laid waste. His seed is not. So this proves that Israel existed in Canaan. Yeah, it's from Canaan. Even though it was an Egyptian record. Yeah. So but it proves that Israel was in Canaan during that period, even though it did not mention Moses or the Exodus. Understand? So now this is it. The problem for Exodus historically. The first one is there are three. I don't want to mention different. Okay, there are three. Let me start first of all with the archaeological evidence. I didn't want to start with Egyptian history. There's a reason why. Okay, the archaeological evidence. What is it? Is the evidence okay? No, every nuclear archaeological evidence for 40 years wilderness journey. If 600,000, 600 plus people wandered in Sinai, okay, look at this. 600 people, 600 plus people. Modern Sinai. Archaeological experts say this thing. Expect mistake. Expect campsites, graves, pottery remains, tools. So far, very little evidence has been found. And Sinai has been heavily surveyed. If according to scripture, they were up to 600 million, like 600,000 people. Not up to. I think it's supposed to be more than that. I think it's supposed to be more than that. If it is true, the record for pottery graveyard, all of those things, campsites, their remains is supposed to be there. It's supposed to be there, but it is not. Aside from that, there's another record. I mean, archaeological experts, they expect something. Is that magnitude of people, that set of people, it will be hard for them to even stay in the desert. Like, how is that even possible? How can it be sustained? In fact, this even shows the miraculous power of God is true. If you look at it, it's true. The Lord kept such number in that place. It's remarkable. You understand? But according to, if you want to do it now, normally it's supposed to be hard. But that's not the point. The point is that Sinai has been heavily surveyed. When I heard about this, when I read that Sinai has been heavily surveyed, it broke me. I meant, it broke me. That was, first of all, I read the Egyptian one first before the Sinai one. So it was like as if the cumulative from Egypt to the Sinai one broke me totally. What was that? If Sinai has been heavily surveyed and there's no evidence, and from Egypt only, so like actually there was no evidence, I was broken. A thought came into my heart and I was like, if it's fine, if I find out that it was actually false, would I go from the road? What would I do? It was at that point that I had a real retrospect of myself. And at that point, the automatic response to that answer was, I will not believe. I will not believe. I will not believe. At that point, now knowing after a few moments later, rethinking that question and the answer that came to my heart, I knew that I have been heavily indoctrinated. It's not just that I have faith, it means that I now have a blind faith. It's a blind faith. It's good to have faith, but it's not a blind faith that is not based on historical fact or those things. So, and the whole point why I came to philosophy, and the whole point why I've been studying and reading is to not just be building my things, my foundation, my knowledge on blind faith. The whole point was to wake me to stir up that complacent spirit. So if it is false, I listen. If this is not true, if the Exodus story is not true, if there is no evidence, nothing whatsoever, and it is not true, then it means that my faith is a lie. Or will I say, God is a liar? As I said, if it is not true, it means that the, this faith is built on lies. I never said that I do not believe in spiritual. For instance, spiritual is very real, but it's possible that even if there is a God, it may not be from this one. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that's just there. I'm not concluded yet. So let's go to the okay. Oh, okay. Let's go and say it. Hold on. The numbers problem. That's the issue. The numbers problem is that the Bible describes about 600 adult men, possibly 2.2 to 3 million total people. So many historians argue that that would be enormous for Asian population. That's the first one. Plenty. Difficult to sustain in desert, hard to not leave massive archaeological traces. So some scholars suggest numbers might have been symbolic or mistranslated. Mistranslated, Miss what? Symbolic. I leave the viewers to their own thoughts. Now, the third problem. No Egyptian record of Egypt. This is it. Egypt kept detailed record of victories and disasters. So some believers, okay, this is it. Egypt kept detailed records of their victories, disasters, and all of those things, you understand? So the fact that they don't have a record when they keep complete and detailed, it just means that it be like this faith, no. It just means that it didn't work out. Now some believers argue that the Egyptians wouldn't record humiliation, but historians still notice silence. All I'm saying is that maybe Egypt doesn't want to record their humiliation because what happened then was very, very humiliating. But do you know that when I read this surface level thing it does not carry much details. It doesn't carry much details. Yeah, it doesn't. I'll explain why. It just seems so superficial. Now explain why. Why explain is understanding Egyptian records. How do they write or something like that? Now ancient Egypt kept detailed records. Yeah, that's true. But we must understand what kind of records they kept and why they kept them. I need to understand what kind of record they kept and why they kept them. First of all, you need to know that the Egyptian records were Egyptian records are selective, ideological, and political. I will explain. Since we originally said what kind of record they kept, so that's it. The kind of record they kept are selective, ideological, and political. So this is it. First of all, you need to know that I will explain it when selective, ideological, and political. Let me start from the political part. The political is that their records are royal propagandas. Most surviving records for Egyptian records came from temple inscriptions, monumental carvings, royal annals, victory stelates, tomb inscriptions. That's where their records come from, the surviving ones. So they're not like our history books that we read now. They are political and religious statements. That's how they are. The Pharaoh was seen at the time as divine king, the maintainer of cosmic order, the chosen of the gods, all glory. So admitting defeat or humiliation would contradict that image. All these things I'm telling you now, these things I'm saying now, when I originally read, as I said, that place I said was super familiar. When I first read that thing, it just felt, ah, it was so, it was like as you just said, they give a detailed whatever and historical record. I felt like if they do that, I, I already presume it was like as if I was imagining that the rules, the records were like the way we write records for our history now. Oh, and this one wrote this and this one wrote this. We can write our embarrassing since it seems Egypt reliable. If not that I was researching something else, something entirely different, and then I now saw where they mention something about Egypt do not like recording humiliating stuff. And I had to go and check with this lady, and I now found more detail, more context with and understanding how they kept their records. I mean, what they kept and what kind of records they kept. So, I was saying that admitting defeat or humiliation would contradict the image of the prophet of the pharaoh, yes, those type of things. So there's that's the political propaganda. That's also an ideological one too. So an example is Ramesses II in his battle with the battle of Kadesh. He portrayed battle as victorious, a massive Egyptian victory. But the Hittite record shows that it was more like a stalemate. So the Egyptians don't come and lie like, oh, the battle did not happen. But the main thing is that they reshaped what? The event. They did some switches to it to preserve what? Royal dignity. So that's why I said it was political propaganda. So they also record some disaster, yeah. But carefully, I say selectivity. See it again. So they blame the way, even if they are recording this, they blame it disaster chaos on they blame disaster on chaos, on the fact that or how do I say, they blame trouble or disaster, yeah, on chaos before be, before like the pharaoh comes into power, like a king comes to power. So it's probably like before the king come into power. I think it's when his power his power is established or something like that. I guess this is guess now. This is a guess. Or it's probably that before he ascends the throne. I don't know which of the two. But the main thing is before that or during that period, any trouble that happened then they blame it on it. Oh, there's no pharaoh there, there's no king. Stand that will maintain the cosmic order. So, or on foreign enemies, or they'll just describe it vaguely. Don't. So, in fact, there's an example where somebody recorded the history of disaster model of all those things, but it was not it was a literature work. It was not a historical documentation. So in fact, even when we are talking about the Egyptian records on disaster and the likes, it is geological or literary. So it may not be the main historical fact. So the third way of looking at historic Egyptian records is foreign rules were sometimes minimalized, that minimal, you know what? It's also selective. So I'm just putting the ones in selectivity. I told you about the political. Oh, I told you about political and ideological. The seems like they fit together. You understand? So they they were formerly ruled by foreign foreigners several times. For example, the Hyksos, the Nubians, the Persians, and the Assyrians. Ah, if Assyrians did not rule Egypt, Assyrians will not rule Egypt. Assyrians will not deal with where they were like the world power back then before Babylon or during Babylon period. There was no water even Egypt. So, but I know that they dealt with Israel in Egypt. Yeah, I know how they dealt with Israel too. But anyway, example is Cambyses the second, who conquered Egypt in 525 BC. Egyptian records didn't glorify the conquest. In fact, later Egyptian writers portrayed Persian Persians negatively. But Persian records describe their rule. You see, they didn't want to even mention itself. They didn't want to mention it. So you can be from there, you can be able to notice there's there's silence sometimes in their record. Yeah. So but the silence does not mean that it did not happen. Yeah. It is because Egyptian royal ideology prefer not to celebrate humiliation. So it is the same ideological something. So it's not common for them to mention their humiliation. No more. So but one thing you need to know is that argument from silence is with historical evidence. Just because they are silent does not mean it did not happen. Yeah, okay. It did not mean it did not happen. Or it did not mean it happened. So that is, yeah. And then the fourth one, history in ancient, in the ancient, in the ancient world, not just Egypt though, was theological. Ancient history wasn't like modern academic history. Yeah, like you know, like what happened in from okay the beginning of like Nigerian history from beginning to the end. I can just go and download one PDF and everything happening in Nigeria or American history or European history. It's not like that then. It was written to honor gods, legitimate, legitimize kings, establish divine order, and preserve memory of greatness. It was theological. So, as I said, we must also be very careful. Silence in ancient records does not automatically prove this event happened either. It simply means Egyptian records are selective, ideological, and political. When I saw this thing, if you see the way Joy wanted to kill, wanted to kill me. What I'm just saying is that in fact it cannot be proven that it did not happen or it did not happen. Anyway, well, that's just that part. Let's go further. Let's go further. See, you never see that. Because of that thought or the fact that history is ideological. No, not just say theological. Do you know what it brought? It brought another pathway. If history is theological in the ancient, does it mean that because Yes, of course. And the writers of the Bible too, at the time, there was progression. They were also ancient men. So is it possible that at least, let's just say at least the book of Moses, that's the five books of Moses. No, let me not say the five books of Moses because three were about the laws. But let's talk about Genesis and Exodus. What if they are also theological, not necessarily historical facts? Wow, wow. It opens up many possibilities. It may be that it was written to preserve, as it said, as I said, um, as I said, maybe it's to establish a divine order. You understand? Honor God instead of gods, and preserve memory of greatness. You understand? Maybe we can now say from David's time, instead of legitimizing kings, you understand? Or maybe from when Samuel started to write the record, because it was Samuel that wrote the book of Judges. Yes, and I wrote Samuel, and then the first book of Samuel, him and somebody else. So then I can say that one may be historical fact because it seems they were getting it from somewhere. That's not even important right now, but it's not that it's not important, it's important. What if it is theological? That's the two books of Moses. So there are now scholarly theories on this Exodus story, which is there are three actually, but I wrote 22 here. So I'll say the three. One is that it is purely theological. It's purely theological. It is theological. They call it the minimalistic view. Then there's a modified historical view. That's the second one. Is that it did not necessarily happen like the way it is recorded. It's more like it happened in a small scale. And then there's the traditional view that it happened. Or the way they write down for Bible now, the same way that's the same way it is. So how will I say the theory? The first theory. This is how it is described. Small exodus that grew into national memory. Maybe a smaller group left Egypt. You understand? A small group left Egypt first and then merged with the Israelites in Canaan. So the Israelites or the story now expanded over generations since it's oral tradition now. Don't modify the oral tradition can be so it expanded, but or the Israelites expanded over generations. They became larger, a large group of people instead of saying that the story modified itself. Understand? So this theory, according to scholars, this particular one, is the one that is taken seriously by them. In a second theory, Israelites emerged from Canaan. So some archaeologists believe Israel was originally Canaanites, they gradually formed separate identities. So the Exodus story becomes or became theological origin story, not historical per se. So you get. So now let's go to the faith perspective or the perspective between faith and history. So faith perspective, many Jewish and Christian believers accept Exodus as historical because scriptural authority, strong theological tradition, and oral history preservation. So, that's how they view it. But historical perspective, many archaeologists say Exodus cannot currently be confirmed historically, but it cannot be fully disproven. So it cannot be confirmed, disproven because of the indirect evidence and the like. Yeah. So that's just it. This is everything I just want to say. This is everything that needs to be said, or is in need, that I had planned. Maybe in the next video we'll talk about whether it is really theological. Because maybe I may not do it. Understand? Or maybe. So the Exodus claim is what? Is Israelite living in Egypt? Possibly. So you can mark it as yes. The enslavement, possibly yes. Moses confronting Egypt, where God counsel. Probable. 10 plagues. Definitely be silence. It's not recent. The Red Sea crossing. Oh my goodness. There's no mention. 40 years in the wilderness. There's no little evidence. So X, arrival towards Canaan. Yes, as that one. Large arrival. That one is not the evidence. This thing that there is overwhelming evidence against Exodus. But since it cannot be disproven, you can just leave it like that. It cannot be proven, that cannot be disproven. So because of that, you cannot say it is true, of course. So it means it may be legit. So have a nice day, guys, and thank you for watching. I'm your boy, seeker of truth, and as I said, I'm a Christian. Yes, done. So everything I do here is to find God, prove He's real, prove Jesus. At some point I will do that, because Jesus is a historical. So accepting Jesus as our Lord and Savior is imperative. You need to do it. But we are going to build on it by God's grace. I pray that God will give us the opportunity to be able to meet and get those words. Brick by brick, step by step. So have a nice day. Peace out.